Hello there. Today we will be reading the chart for Taylor Swift. I know a lot of people have said, no, we don't want people like that. We want, like highbrow, we want more intellectual kinds of people or, politicians or historical figures. I get that, but I don't know. I'm trying to think of people that would be interesting to a wider audience. And I just found that Taylor Swift is the most Googled person for 2024. So I know this will be interesting to somebody out there. So hopefully it's interesting for you. And honestly, when I first started doing charts of celebrities, she was the first person I thought of. I'm not necessarily a Taylor Swift fan, but she's clearly a household name. I think her chart would be fun to read. And this chart reading, just like any chart reading I do, it can serve multiple purposes. You may be here because you're interested in Taylor Swift. You may be here because you're interested in seeing how to read a chart. Maybe you're learning how to read a chart, or maybe you're curious how I read a chart. Since yes, I do offer birth chart readings. If you'd like one, check out my website. It's in the description. But where was I going with that? Oh, I did want to say that there is a slight difference here. So basically, the approach that I have to this chart reading will be basically what you could expect from a paid reading from me. The only difference is that with celebrity chart readings, I do try to make them a little more brief, since I don't think, someone who's seeking a personal reading from me, they're going to be much more interested in their reading than someone who's just, browsing the chart reading of a celebrity that they may or may not be super interested in. You know what I mean? So I do try to keep these readings brief. Sometimes I do get stuck talking, especially if the chart is of particular interest to me. But otherwise, I will try to keep this under an hour. All my paid readings are at least an hour. Sometimes they run slightly under. Usually they're, a minute, like an hour and 6 minutes, hour and 10 minutes, something like that. But anyway, enough about that. Let's look at the chart here. So this chart is for, I'm using Astro Theme, by the way. It's not a secret. I'm using this chart for, it's Wednesday, December 13th, 1989 at 5:17 a.m. in Reading, Pennsylvania, or Reading, Pennsylvania, however you say that. So yeah, I guess I could have waited till December to do this, but that's okay. So this means that she has Sun in Sagittarius with Moon in Cancer and Scorpio rising. And what I personally find interesting, since I clearly already know who this is generally, the thing that surprised me is that at first glance, this doesn't look like the chart of a celebrity, and that can be the case sometimes. There are, of course, generalizations, there are patterns, but there are always exceptions to the rule. That is interesting, though. Such a major, like, mega celebrity, at first glance, this doesn't look like the chart of a celebrity. What I mean by that is usually what we see with celebrity charts is planets clustered around the midheaven. Definitely in the 10th house, probably more than any other area, but to some extent the ninth or 11th houses as well. Usually there are a lot of planets there, and here there are no planets. It's a dead zone. It's quiet. It's a ghost town up by the midheaven. So that's a little bit weird, especially with midheaven in Virgo. That does remind me of Kim Kardashian, though. So both Kim Kardashian and Taylor Swift have like mega, big reputations, big celebrity status. Both are Virgo midheaven. That to me is just so weird. Virgo is an awkward energy. It's more introverted. So to put the midheaven, which of course has so much to do with career and reputation, to put that in Virgo for these mega celebrities to me is a bit interesting. But I'm always learning. I did notice, though, I think there is one major placement that does indicate, what's the word, like a probability for celebrity status. And that one is actually not even indicated in this chart, but it's the South Node. So, the South Node has to do with a person's past and kind of what they're used to. It's their comfort zone. And even though Astro Theme doesn't show the South Node, which I think they should, but we still know where the South Node is because it's opposite the North Node. North Node is at 17 degrees Aquarius in the third house. That means Miss Swift's South Node is at 17 degrees Leo in the ninth house. And so that to me does indicate that, with South Node in Leo and the ninth house, both Leo and the ninth house correspond to really public energies. So this would indicate that she's really comfortable in the limelight. And I know, I'm going to put aside any kind of like knowledge of her, which there is not a whole lot. But on some level, it is her comfort zone. She can handle attention well. That's what South Node in Leo would indicate. What else? And with South Node in ninth house, again, that would indicate that she has a tendency to be recognized publicly, or that she's comfortable being recognized publicly, etc. So that is kind of telling. One other, since we're talking about patterns in the charts of celebrities, other than saying placements around the midheaven, placements in the 9th, 10th, and 11th houses, the other major pattern that I see is planets clustered around the ascendant. Sometimes in the 1st house, sometimes in the 12th house, but especially right conjunct the ascendant. And she does fit that pattern. She has Mars with a pretty tight conjunction to the ascendant. That's actually so crazy, because I was just looking at the chart of Beyonce, and I might even still have it up. Yeah, I do. It's right here. But there's a weird similarity between Beyonce and Taylor Swift's charts. I'm not even fans of these people, but their charts are interesting. Celebrity charts are often very interesting. They're celebrities for a reason. But anyway, so the similarity that I find really fascinating between these two charts, I know I'm getting a little distracted, but I think this is interesting. Beyonce's rising is Libra, and so that means it's ruled by Venus, and Venus is conjunct the ascendant. So in other words, the chart ruler, which is Venus, since Venus rules over Libra, which is the sign where the ascendant is, the chart ruler is conjunct the ascendant. So that's a pretty big deal. And it happens to be Venus, which is all about pleasure, desire, attraction, etc. So that's what dominates her energy. That's why, Beyonce is known for that. She's known for being like, aesthetically, not just like aesthetically pleasing in a physical way, but she's known for being, like, I don't know, socially graceful, I guess. Like, that's the kind of reputation I get. And Taylor Swift has a very interesting, a very similar phenomenon. Her ascendant is Scorpio, so that means it's ruled by Mars, and Mars is conjunct the ascendant. So very interesting. I think it's very powerful having your chart ruler conjunct the ascendant. And honestly, I don't know a whole lot about that. That's not something I usually see with charts that I read. I've read many, probably hundreds of charts over the last year or two, and this is not something I usually see. This is very rare. So to have that, I think it's very powerful. For Taylor Swift, though, I think it would be a little bit more problematic, because Mars is a malefic. Mars can be extremely powerful. Mars is a sort of counterpart to Venus. Venus is, all about pleasure and kind of love and light. It's a very kind of fluffy energy, feel good energy. Mars is kind of the opposite. Mars also has to do with pleasure, in the sense that it has to do with ambition and drive and, sex drive, as well as like, it's kind of like a dopamine energy. Mars, if Venus is feminine, Mars is masculine. So this may be kind of surprising to see in, Taylor Swift's chart, like America's Sweetheart or what have you. There's this really heavy Mars focus. Mars, if Mars is the chart ruler and conjunct the ascendant, in my mind, even just that alone clearly puts Mars, as the most dominant planet, which is interesting because Mars doesn't rule over a whole lot of many different placements. There are Pluto and Lilith in Scorpio, along with, again, Ascendant and Mars. No planets in Aries, though. So that's very interesting. There may be this, like, that would suggest to me that she's extremely driven and that she's kind of hyper aware. Scorpio sees everything, but a lot of that part, Scorpio sees the darkness. So that would indicate to me that she may be kind of pessimistic. We have to keep in mind, though, we are blending that with Sun and Sagittarius. I just noticed, though, she has no other Sagittarius placements, which is unusual. Okay, I'm just getting a little bit more familiar with this chart. Really, I think there's almost kind of a general yod forming. Sort of. It's not exact, but when you look at her most dominant signs, I would say those would be Scorpio, Capricorn, and Cancer. And I guess that's actually not a yod. I'm sorry. I was a little off balance. Scorpio and Cancer trine. Scorpio and Capricorn oppose one another. But anyway, this is much different than what I sort of anticipated. I knew she had Sun in Sagittarius, so usually we have more planets in the same sign as our sun sign. Like usually at least Mercury will be in the same sign as your sun sign. But in this case, Mercury's in Capricorn. Not only does she have no other Sagittarius placements, she has no other fire placements. You know, it's so wild. Beyonce actually has the same thing. Now I keep comparing them. Beyonce has Sun in Virgo. She has no other Virgo placements, no other Earth placements. Taylor Swift has Sun in Sagittarius, no other Sagittarius placements, no other fire placements. So really interesting. I don't know if that connection is really relevant or useful for anything, but that is another kind of weird similarity. And I don't know why not having any planets in your sun sign, I don't think that would indicate you are meant to be famous or anything like that. At least I don't think so. But anyway, what was I talking about? So this chart actually looks very pessimistic to me. Sun in Sagittarius is a notoriously optimistic placement. So that would still be true on some level. I think, Moon is in Cancer. Cancer can kind of go either way. I think Cancer can come across very like optimistic and hopeful, but Cancer can also be very moody, and Cancer can be very cynical, very pessimistic, So combining Cancer Moon with Scorpio rising and Mars with, Capricorn Mercury, I would think that she'd be a realist. I would think that she'd be, very like cunning and again hyper aware. And that, she may be extremely ambitious. I've noticed that the most ambitious personalities also are usually a little bit more cynical. And I think that's for a reason. If you're super optimistic, then you can kind of just relax and chill. Yes, you may be more driven, to succeed, but I don't think you're going to put as much effort into things if you're more optimistic, generally speaking. It's the signs that really think everything's going to hell that, have this really bleak outlook that, for whatever reason, are working more. And I know that might sound weird, that might not seem intuitive, but if you look at the zodiac signs, the same zodiac signs that are cynical are also ambitious, like Scorpio and Capricorn. So that's what I would anticipate from her. I would think that she is a little bit more glass half empty kind of outlook. I don't know if that resonates for any of you that may be like Taylor Swift fans, but that's what I see. I also see, like, I do know that she has, I believe she's notorious for having like awkward interactions with journalists and things like that, and I'm not saying it's her fault. I'm just saying that's been her experience, like, people asking her awkward questions. And I would kind of attribute that to Mars conjunct the ascendant in Scorpio. Like, there's something, how do I put this? Like, this is fighting energy. This is warrior energy. So this, to me, would indicate that even if she just means very well and she wants to just, be chill and just live her life, other people will sense like a fighting energy from her, if that makes sense, which, you could argue, is that actually accurate or not? I don't know. It's just a vibe. It's just an aura. The first impression she gives off would be kind of scorpionic. So that would indicate, she comes across as like cool and sexy. And this is not from my personal opinion. This is just, that's what I would say about, Mars energy is cool. Mars energy is sexy. What else? Mars energy comes across powerful. So that's the vibe she would give off. She would come across like she has an agenda or like she's plotting something, even if she's not. Like, again, she may just be minding her own business, like doing the most mundane activity, but she comes across like secretive and so powerful. She's thinking about something, she's planning. That's just the Scorpio energy. I think part of it is that hyper awareness. And that's what I wanted to get to as well, is that whenever I see a lot of major Scorpio placements or Scorpio energy in a chart, I see so much potential, because Scorpio is, yes, they are more negative. They're very ambitious, but they're so hyper aware. Scorpio, I think, more than anything, is a very deep feeling sign, but Scorpio is very intellectual and very analytical as well. So that combination of having that really deep emotion with that, constantly thinking mind, that can be extremely powerful, and people with major Scorpio placements like that can be extremely creative because of, those different modalities that they have access to. So yeah, people with those Scorpio placements, they can be excellent at reading people. They have that kind of psychic intuition. And it's not uncommon for them to be very musically oriented or to be into performing. And I swear I'm not just saying that because I know this is her chart. She has multiple placements to me that would indicate musical ability. So, moon in Cancer, where it's in domicile. So there's a lot of moon energy as well. That's a lot of emotion. That's a lot of passion. And I've said in recent videos that I correlate the sign of Cancer with singing. This is actually something I feel very deeply about. Excuse me. Clearly, I'm not like singing right now. I should edit those out, but I hate editing, so I'm sorry. You're just gonna have to deal with me coughing and sputtering. But I know it's really popular to think of Taurus as the sign for singers. I really don't agree with that at all. I think Taurus correlates to the throat chakra. I think Tauruses have excellent speaking voices. They have pleasant like voices in general. But where do you actually sing from? Do you sing from your throat, or do you sing like, I feel like you sing from your chest, from your lungs, from your, don't they say like from your diaphragm or something like that? And even on an emotional level, you sing from your heart, right? Or from your gut, maybe, both physically and emotionally. So that makes way more sense to me, to connect to Cancer, which deals with the chakras around that general area. Also, I've known many females in particular who have had Sun in Cancer, and they are all singers. They're all into singing. I just really haven't experienced that with Taurus Sun individuals. So anyway, I know there's another tangent. You can expect a lot of those from me. But I'm just illustrating, I really do view Cancer Moon, Cancer placements in general, as being deeply musical, and specifically with singing, though. I've met so many Cancers. I don't think I've met any that aren't into singing. Many do so privately, though, but I know that they do because they've told me. But anyway, so, we're combining the Scorpio energies, which are so, cerebral, but also emotional, so creative, so artistic. Cancer, which is into singing and music in general. Sagittarius, that's another sign that I don't think other people have recognized as being musical, but I've also known many people with Sagittarius placements, and I wouldn't say all of them are musical, but definitely more Sagittarius people are musicians than other signs, other placements. And Sagittarius is another sign that is also deeply emotional, but also deeply intellectual as well. They're a deep feeler, they're a deep thinker. Sagittarius can be into really any kind of music. They can also be into performing, like songwriting as well, since they can be great with words. And again, she only has Sun there. There aren't, there's nothing else going on, but still, even just that, and especially, stacking it all on top, Cancer, Scorpio, Sagittarius, all very musical. And then the last sign that I really see being very dominant for her is Capricorn. I do see her Aquarius Venus. I will talk about that at some point. But Capricorn, Mercury, as well as a few other, like outer planets. I wouldn't normally think of Capricorn as a musical sign, but if you actually look at all the Capricorn musicians, people with Sun or Moon or other placements in Capricorn, there are so many, which is really interesting because Capricorn is a detached sign, but Capricorn is excellent at like strategy and thinking about timing and things like that. I don't know. I don't know exactly why there's a connection between Capricorn and musicians, but there really is a lot. There's a lot of really great, really deep Capricorn musicians. So my point is, combining all these signs, to me, it's really clear that she would have like musical talents, abilities, musical inclinations, etc. And I honestly think I would see that even if I didn't know whose chart it was. I can't guarantee that for sure, because I do know whose chart it is. But I definitely associate all of her major signs with musical ability. Aquarius is the only one that she has a placement in that I don't really associate with musical ability. Are there great Aquarius musicians? Sure. Mostly rappers, though. But which is not that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's more specifically rappers. But Venus is there. That's a different story. We'll talk about that later. Okay, but let's just talk in more generalities. So I see a very passionate person, very emotional. Again, I see someone who's a little bit more cynical or pessimistic. What else? I see someone with a really powerful vibe, powerful aura. but I see someone polarizing as well. Having that again. I think Scorpio. I didn't realize that she is Scorpio. Scorpio to me is the sign that stands out the most. Cancer is pretty strong as well. We'll talk about that in a second. But so yeah, really Scorpio and Cancer. So that makes sense. Two water signs, deeply emotional, deeply passionate, deeply creative. But I was just saying with Mars is the main planetary energy, I think, being conjunct the ascendant and the chart ruler. And so that would indicate that she's polarizing. You're either going to really love her or really hate her. And again, it's not anything that she's necessarily intending. If I were doing a reading for her, I would say, and clearly she's got a hold of this. She doesn't need advice from me, but I would say to utilize that, and maybe she has utilized that. I think it can gain a lot of attention to be a polarizing figure. I think especially these days. So yeah, there's this intensity there for sure. Let's talk about Cancer though, because there are some interesting things happening there. Moon is in domicile in Cancer. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. So the two placements that thrive the most in that sign are both in that sign for her. I believe. Oh, I could be wrong about this. I believe Kurt Cobain also has Moon and Jupiter in Cancer. I'm gonna look that up real quick. This will take me 2 seconds. Not literally. Almost literally. Yeah, so I'm glad I showed you this. What are the odds? There is another connection to a musician. I would have connected her chart with this chart, even if they weren't both musicians, even if Kurt Cobain was like a president or something, which clearly he's not. But but yeah, I'm just saying, it is interesting to major celebrities. Two of the biggest celebrities of all time both have Moon and Jupiter in Cancer. Kurt Cobain's was, I think, even stronger because he had them in the 10th house. So, he was known, he was loved. Like, there are so many diehard Kurt Cobain fans and people that just relate to him on such a deep level. It's largely because of Jupiter and Moon in Cancer, So there's that raw emotion that was out in the public for everyone to see and to relate to. I don't want to get lost in this chart, but it is really weird for a celebrity. Like that makes sense for a celebrity. Moon and Jupiter, both in domicile and exaltation in 10th house Cancer. That is like boom, fireworks. Everybody look at me. Everyone's connecting with him on such a deep emotional level. That looks like celebrity status to me. What doesn't look like celebrity status is this stellium clustered around the descendant, But I know he did not want to be a celebrity. I think he really struggled with that. And I don't know a lot about him either. But to me, this is really odd for a celebrity. This is one of the strangest things I've seen. Because if your planets are clustered around the descendant, you're very focused on other people. You want people to like you. Like, you want to have a strong connection with others, which that's not the energy I would associate with celebrity status. I would think of celebrities as being more like independent and more just, here I am, I don't care what you think type of thing. So that looks like a struggle. Anyway, but yeah, very interesting. Moon and Jupiter both. I didn't know that. I don't think I realized they both had that. I knew he did, obviously, but so that's very auspicious. The difference though is that his is in the 10th house, so that's what was highlighted. That's what people saw on a universal level. For her, it's a little bit more tricky. Moon and Jupiter are in the 8th house. 8th house is more of a hidden house. It's kind of like a lull in the energy, and it's a little bit more obscure. It's not as, it still is one of the highest houses in the sky, but it's declining. Like, in other words, when Taylor Swift was born, Moon and Jupiter were both beginning to set. They still both would have been very visible in the sky, especially because she was born at night, like just, I don't know, maybe an hour before sunrise. So Moon and Jupiter would probably have been very beautiful if it was a clear night, which I don't know the weather, but yeah, they were setting though, is my point. They weren't necessarily close to the western horizon yet, but they were on their way down. I believe when planets are in the 8th house, they are traveling down faster than in any other house. So that, that has a metaphorical significance. Like there's this decline there. so so I'm not sure exactly how to connect the dots for you from there. I would say with Moon and Jupiter in Cancer, she does have that larger than life, personality, that raw emotion that I think so many people can connect with. But for her, again, it's gonna be more hidden. With Kurt Cobain, it's more public. Everybody can see that, right? But with her, it's a little bit more subtle. I think in a weird way, I think you have to get past this Mars ascendant, like this Mars energy, like that's going to be very polarizing. So only people will get to know her past that surface level. Like, how do I put this? I think this chart suggests to me a personality that everybody's going to see her, everyone's going to notice her, but a lot of people will just judge her on the surface, and that's kind of weird for me to say because I really don't know her. Like, I'm not honestly that interested in her. But yeah, many people, everyone knows of her, but many people are just going to know her on a shallow level. Only certain people will connect with her on a really deep level, but those people that do will go very deep because of this, because of these placements being there. There is that very deep emotional and kind of soulful energy, but it's concealed. It's also protected by like a shield, by by the armor of the scorpion, the exoskeleton, if that makes sense. What else can we talk about? Also one thing I didn't mention. So combining Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Cancer, and South Node in ninth house Leo, I think that's where it makes sense that definitely huge musical ability, musical talent, but also this tendency to be in the limelight or to handle attention well. That's where it begins to start to make sense. So this chart, again, it doesn't immediately look like the chart of a celebrity to me, but once I dig into it, then it makes a little bit more sense. Specifically for a musician, though, I don't see I don't see well, I should be careful with what I say. I do see, like, because she has so many placements in Scorpio and Capricorn in particular, I do think those are some of the best signs when it comes to handling a large reputation, especially a provocative reputation, because both Scorpio and Capricorn are actually the most private signs. So that would suggest to me that she's very capable of handling attention. Like, she can be charming with that South Node in Leo. She can be, cool and fun and sexy, between the Leo, South Node, and the Scorpio placements. She's got that down. She can be charismatic. But also, maybe even more importantly, what I was just saying is she also knows how to conceal information. I think that is so crucial because I don't think people realize how alienating it is to be a famous person. I don't know from personal experience, but that's just my take on it, is that it can actually be very isolating. Yeah, everyone does know and love you on a kind of public level, but I think that can make it more difficult to have close relationships. We haven't even started talking about her relationships yet. But where was I going with that? But that's why I think it's so vital, though, to, Scorpio and Capricorn understand this. They understand that the world is dangerous. You can't trust everyone. They understand what information or what kind of even emotion they need to project forward to have a strong reputation, and what information and feeling to keep private and keep to themselves. So it's not that they're just super shy and quiet and internalized. Like they're excellent at projecting leadership, projecting a reputation, but they're also great at keeping things in as well. So I think that's where I stopped myself. I could definitely see her being a major musician, but I could also see her just excellent at maintaining a reputation in general, or also maintaining like a business, maintaining a brand. Both Scorpio and Capricorn are so ambitious. They're so strategic, and again, I think they know how to have boundaries, how to have walls with other people. Let's see. This is what else to talk about in this first chapter. I try to keep my readings compartmentalized into chapters. Let's move on. Let's talk about, because I don't want this to get too long. Let's talk about her past life themes, and we'll talk about her major challenges and potential in this life, and we'll talk about her upbringing a little bit as well. So for past life themes, I see her being a very public figure, which I know sounds kind of silly because it's like, well, yeah, she is that in this life as well. That's not unusual, though. I do see that, like, this is something I've been thinking about for the last couple months as I've been reading charts. Some charts show me that a person is really repeating the same themes that they've explored in past lives, and other charts show me someone who is completely going in a new direction. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. We're playing around with some of the same themes that we have in past lives, but we're also incorporating new themes and learning new things, new things as well. So that's why it's not surprising. Like, yeah, sometimes when I do talk about past life themes, it does seem very familiar. But that would be the case for her. South Node is in ninth house Leo. So that to me would suggest that yes, she was maybe kind of famous on some level or very involved with her community. Ninth house would usually be something religious though, or just something very involved with the community in general. So involved with, like, I don't know, local politics, or involved with the church. Ninth house is historically associated with the church because I believe, my take on it is that it's not that the ninth house is the most spiritual house in the zodiac. Like, ninth house can have to do with philosophy and spirituality to some extent, but we have to keep in mind historically the church kind of controlled society, if that makes sense. Like, and it can still in some cases. So I think that's what ancient astrologers were talking about. Ninth house has to do with, like, public affairs, and it's one of the most public houses. Ninth, 10th, and 11th houses all have to do with your public affairs in different ways. So anyway, my point is she may have been someone that was involved in, like, the clergy or whatever the power structure was in her community. That's what I see her being involved in. But also it may have been something intellectual or spiritual as well. So either being a clergy member, priest, shaman, or maybe some kind of intellectual that was involved with, like, public affairs, but definitely someone who is known about. It's not her first time living a life as a celebrity. She's had other lifetimes with, I don't know if it was full-on celebrity status to the same extent that it is now, or maybe she was just very, maybe she's a local celebrity. Maybe she was, like, involved with the rulership of her town or province or whatever. I don't know. I don't have the details. I can only see the themes, but that's what I see. I definitely see that public recognition is the most major thing. So let's talk about the south node and the north node. So south node has to do with past life themes. It's what we're used to when we start out life. So as a kid, actually, what real quick change it, since we do need to talk about her childhood. South node, I look to south node and the IC to see what someone was like as a kid. So south node is again in ninth house Leo. IC is in Pisces. So combining those, that would indicate a child that was very warm, very outgoing, very open with the world. And I think she would have been a kind of childlike child. I think she would have been very playful, very creative. She may have been, I believe she was very musical even at a young age. That makes sense with IC in Pisces and South Node in Leo. That's another thing I can see as well. Some of us are very similar personality-wise as kids as we are compared to as adults. And some of us are dramatically different as children compared to how we turn out as adults. So for her, I think she would be somewhat similar. I know that she doesn't have any major placements in Leo or Pisces other than the South Node and IC. But again, we have this, like, fire and water combination. So in other words, like, as a child, she would be very soulful, very passionate, emotional, creative. I still see those things being true today as well. It's just slightly different. So yeah, she would have a similar personality as a kid as she does now, from what I can tell. And again, that musical, or that creative energy is definitely there too. But anyway, let's go back to talking about her challenges, though. So with South Node in ninth house Leo, it's familiar for her to get attention, to be the center of attention, to maybe be a little bit self-centered at times, but also to be very generous as well. That's familiar. She's done that in past lives. She gets that. It's relatively easy. I don't know if I should say easy, but it's familiar. She gets it. She's good at that. So I would say, use that. Like, hell yeah, that's awesome. We all have huge strengths and innate abilities that come from our South Node. The tricky part is if you completely dwell on the themes of your South Node, it will lead to your downfall. Your soul will rebel because you're not meant to just completely repeat all the same themes of a past life. That would make this life pointless. unless you are just really, working out themes that are taking you maybe hundreds or thousands of years to work out, that's different. That's not just repeating things though. But that's not what I see here. For her, her north node is in third house Aquarius. So that's suggesting like, yeah, you're great at, handling attention, maintaining your reputation and being a celebrity. Can you just like be chill though? Like, can you, it may be harder for her to exist in a more detached, more kind of private context. North house in North house, what the heck? North node in third house Aquarius. That to me suggests someone who's learning how to be anonymous. And I know that sounds really weird. I don't mean that in the sense that she's conceited or something like that. I just think that, she's so ingrained with celebrity status. It may be more foreign, more alien for her to just be anonymous. Like, can you help the world in a more indirect way? And there's nothing wrong with being involved directly in having that celebrity status. Again, she's good at it, so that would be a waste not to utilize all that. But it would also be a waste not to branch out and learn. So that's where I feel like I sound a little bit preachy at this part of the reading. But I always say too, like whoever I'm talking to at this point, I'm sure she's learned a lot of this already. Part of it as well is just learning to be more like Aquarius. So learning to be a little bit, cool, calm, detached. I think that may be very hard for her because she is so passionate. She's so emotional. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's always a give and take, a pro and a con with pretty much anything I talk about in astrology. So she's got, being emotional, putting your ego into something and really, having high standards for yourself and putting all your emotion into things. Like that's who she is. That's ingrained. It's harder for her to just, understand that, everything's not about her. Like she doesn't have to have such high standards for herself all the time. There's a whole other world, like in the grand scheme of things, like we are minuscule, right? Maybe for her, not so much. Like literally the world kind of does revolve slightly around her a little bit. But that's because of that south node again. So yeah, just, I don't know. I would recommend finding balance with, maybe being directly involved, but also maybe retreating, which I think she does. I don't know much about her, but having periods of solace, is that the right word? Or like a hiatus. I think that would be really great, especially where I wouldn't recommend completely just retreating and like completely detaching from the world. I would say like, can you retreat and whatever you're doing to help the world, like if it's music or whatever it is, can you retreat and have times where you are like alone or just with close loved ones, but still working on your projects though, like working to change the world and influence the world, but from a more detached kind of behind the scenes manner. That's what Aquarius suggests, especially because North Node is at the bottom of the chart. It's a very private area. So that's what I would suggest. Learning that balance and learning, maybe finding like a balance, a happy medium, maybe oscillating between like a public life and a more private life. But either way, you're still working on changing the world and influencing people. It's just in a dramatically different way, if that makes sense. So I think that's what she is struggling with, and probably that's what she's learned a lot about. I'm sure she's achieved that, some of that stability, some of that well-roundedness. I do think, though, that this will be harder for her than, we all have different lessons that we're learning that are centered around our North Node. But for some, it's harder than others. The reason why I would think that it's harder for her is because she doesn't have any other air placements other than Venus, which is nearby in Aquarius. But there's a lack of air energy in her chart. So that to me would suggest that she is someone who has really high standards for herself. She takes everything very seriously. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's great to have high standards. It's great to put your soul and your ego into things, and it really matters. Like you put your heart into things. That's awesome. But you can have too much of a good thing, like having such high standards for yourself, being so serious. Air energy is what shows us that we can take everything with a grain of salt. We can laugh at life and the world. We don't have to take everything so seriously. So I think that may be difficult for her. Also, I think with Venus in Aquarius and Venus being the North Node, that suggests that it may be difficult for her to connect with her own pleasure and desire, her own kind of romantic relationships, which obviously, she's notorious for having a lot of songs about that. I'm going to do best to compartmentalize what little knowledge I have about her and just focus on her chart. um, but I would suggest, well, especially having minor, like, we're not talking about sun, moon, rising, but having a placement like Venus near the north node, I think that would suggest that it's more difficult to connect with that placement for her. And I think that would be especially true because that's her only air planet, excuse me. Um, so it's really interesting. I would have expected Venus to be really strong in her chart, but what I'm seeing is Venus is all alone. Venus is by the north node, which is, kind of an uncomfortable place sometimes. It can be foreign. And Venus is in Aquarius, which is really awkward. It's not technically in detriment, but, Aquarius is a very cerebral, kind of robotic sign. So to put your planet of like love, affection, desire in this area, I think it's hard for her to connect with that part of life. So that seems very difficult, especially considering there's so much malefic energy. She does get this really beautiful, sweet, moon and Jupiter in Cancer that we talked about. But yeah, now that I think about it, mixing all the Scorpio with Capricorn with Venus, the way that Venus is, I think it may be hard for her to just relax and like stop and smell the roses, enjoy the success that you've created. I think that may be very difficult for her. I think she's, her chart suggests to me someone who is constantly focused on the negative, which, again, there are pros and cons to that as well. She's always ambitious, always working on something new, always doing something. But, this is all about balance as well. Like, what are you working for? It's great to work hard and constantly be, focused on your goals and always creating an empire, creating something new. That's awesome. But what's the point of it, though, if you never stop to enjoy it? If you never give yourself that credit. Why are we always working for tomorrow and never enjoying today? Like, tomorrow never comes around, right? So that's another struggle as well. Last thing I'll mention really quickly about challenges is Saturn, which is conjunct Neptune and to a lesser extent Mercury, and Saturn's about halfway through Capricorn in the second house. So that's interesting. It looks like she would have had her Saturn return right before COVID, like 2019 or so. That may have been a very challenging time for her. She may have had to grow up a lot and be a lot more mature. I think with Saturn and Capricorn at a young age, she may have really rebelled from like society and like rules and regulations and authority figures. Like she wouldn't want any of that. In some ways, though, she may have lacked those things. Like she didn't have structure. So I'm not sure which one it is. Honestly, Saturn and Capricorn is a tricky one for me to analyze. I don't know if the struggle was not having any kind of like discipline, authority, rules, regulations, like lacking that structure and wanting it, or if she had the structure, rules, regulations, and didn't want it. It's one of those two, or maybe somehow both. But basically with Saturn and Capricorn, it shows that she's a leader. She's meant to create some kind of like, she's meant to be an authority figure. And really, especially combining all of the Scorpio with Capricorn and having such a Mars focus, it really looks to me like she's a leader. She's meant to do something on her own. It doesn't surprise me that, she's a trendsetter. Other people follow her. That makes sense with all the Scorpio and Capricorn placements in general. But what was I talking about? Challenges. But yeah, Saturn and Capricorn, especially as she gets into her 30s and beyond. Saturn and Capricorn to me suggests a leader, someone who is, very like mature and is creating some kind of structure, is creating some kind of rules, regulations, etc. Let's talk about the childhood real quick again. So again, I see a really creative, really passionate kid. And her chart suggests to me that her parents were very different from each other. They had different parenting styles, different attitudes. They expected different things from her. If I had to guess, I would suggest that I actually see both her mother and her father as being very close to her. I see her as connecting more with her father, though. Like, both were very, as far as I can tell, both were very involved in her upbringing. Both were there. Honestly, don't usually see that in charts. Um, but again, there is this like small amount of disconnect between her and her mother, as far as I can tell. The reason why I'm saying that is because Moon is in domicile in Cancer, which suggests like a strong motherly figure or strong connection with the mother. But at the same time, Moon is somewhat close to the descendant, which suggests a disconnect between her and her mother, like them not seeing eye to eye. Maybe, she was different than what her mother expected. I don't know exactly. So still involved, but just like slightly more disconnected compared to the sun, which is very at home in Sagittarius and in the first house. Any planets you have in the first house dominate the chart. I'm so sorry. I've been a mess this video. Real quick about that before I continue, because I this is something I missed in the first chapter. So any planets you have in the first house dominate the entire chart. So having Mars and the Sun, I'm using Placidus right now, house system. I usually use Equal, but Astro Theme, for celebrity charts, they use Placidus, which is fine with me. But anyway, so Mars and Sun in the first house. They'd actually both be in the first house with equal houses anyway, if you want to get technical. So get off my back. But anyway, so anything in the first house dominates the chart. So Mars and the Sun, these are the two most masculine planets, which is really interesting. She comes across very feminine. But we have to keep in mind, like, it's more on a thematic level. So when I say masculine, like, she may be very ambitious, very driven, very action oriented. In a way, she's kind of a disruptor. She's meant to disrupt the status quo. That's more what I mean by masculine energy. What else? She may be very sexual as well, which I feel like is weird to talk about. I don't really want to know that. But it makes sense to keep that kind of under wraps because of, Scorpio is very sexual, but it usually keeps that under wraps. And especially with Mercury, Capricorn, that's a very private placement. And even Cancer as well is a very sexual sign, but they also keep it under wraps. Anyway, but Sun and Mars in first house. Sun in first house Sagittarius is another placement that makes a lot of sense for celebrity status, because having Sun in the first house would almost make you a little bit like a Leo. You'd have that really strong Sun energy. You could handle attention very well. You could be very charismatic. And then putting that in Sagittarius, it's a very similar energy that's reinforcing these like very fiery, warm, charismatic sort of themes. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. That was something I missed earlier. Okay, let's talk about her career a little bit. So this is going to be at least as long as my normal readings. Celebrity charts are interesting though. Like, even if I'm not even interested in the person, they usually have a weird chart. They've got an interesting chart usually. Okay, so for career and reputation, again, it's interesting that midheaven is in Virgo. So that would suggest an intellectual career, especially doing something where you can be behind the scenes. This all sounds so off to me, but Virgo midheaven to me suggests someone who doesn't mind being part of a larger structure. So I usually see someone, I feel like this is dead wrong for her, but I usually see someone with midheaven and Virgo as not minding like maybe working for a large company. Like, they like that security. They like conforming to, a structure. So this is very different than the rest of her chart. The rest of her chart is so instinctual. There's a lot of animal signs, so a lot of emotion, and definitely some major fire and water placements, but then also Capricorn. That's very different than Virgo. Virgo is so humble. So this would mean that she comes across like Virgo in public, in her reputation. She comes across modest, down to earth, maybe cerebral, intellectual, analytical. To some extent that would be true, but I think that's it's like half true. Yeah, that is true, but there's also this whole other side. I think people may miss how deeply emotional she is. Because midheaven and Virgo is a very deeply emotional sign, but they very much keep it private, and they like kind of analyze it out, if that makes sense. And they kick on the mental energy. So that's the side of, that's the public side of her. But even Scorpio is very emotional, but they also usually, keep that emotion under wraps if they can. I think more than any other sign, Scorpio wants to be in control of their own emotions. So yeah, I'm seeing someone who comes across very put together, definitely very intelligent. That's true, right? But very analytical, very cerebral. But what I'm seeing is that underneath all that, it's not untrue. It's just that I see a person that is actually much more emotional and very passionate, and I think that's something that may not always come through like to her wider audience, or to, like, America in general, or the world in general. But for the career, so I definitely see, and I think in a weird way, Virgo midheaven kind of connects with the North Node in third house Aquarius. She's meant to explore some kind of cerebral avenue, like, she is so passionate, and I think that's great to utilize that. But then also, I think she's exploring, like, becoming more mentally oriented, becoming more analytical, maybe more strategic, things like that. So I think, especially combining those two things, I think can make for clearly a very successful musician, and successful celebrity in general. She's kind of maintaining a brand. She's maintaining that public image. But anyway, talking about the career, though, I would definitely notice the South Node in ninth house Leo. So it's this weird combination of South Node at the top of the chart in ninth house Leo, but then also midheaven in Virgo. So she kind of can do it all. She wants to be part of a larger structure and conform and be more analytical and kind of behind the scenes, but she also wants to be that kind of first person, in the company, like the that CEO, that business person, that leader, the one that is the spokesperson, the one that is charismatic and charming and, gets all the attention. She wants to be that as well. So I think in a way, it's a really beautiful combination. Her main energies that I would attribute to career and reputation, like the South Node and the Midheaven. I don't usually attribute South Node to career and reputation, but it's her main placement that's at the top of the chart, though. So combining South Node and Leo with Midheaven and Virgo, we're mixing fire and earth. Fire and earth, I think, is the most productive elemental combination. It's really excellent. It suggests that she can also, on the one hand, she is a big dreamer. She can come up with like the larger than life ideas, and she can be charming, and she can be so in the moment, so instinctual. That's the fire side. But she can also be, again, cerebral, strategic, logical, down to earth, humble, working behind the scenes, making sure, like, basically she can come up with these big ideas and big dreams and, the creativity, but then also she has the follow through, the work ethic to actually make those big dreams a reality. So that's where I think, again, that fire earth combination is what I see standing out career and reputation wise, and it makes sense that she would be so successful in that area. So really weird. I think the main takeaway for me so far is just that, again, at first glance it doesn't look like a celebrity chart, but the more you break it down, the more it makes sense. You've got all the ingredients for for a celebrity, for a musician, for someone who can maintain a business, a brand, a reputation, etc. Okay, let's talk about her relationship stuff. Compatibility. What kind of person is she attracted to? How do I see the ideal relationship playing out for her? Yeah. So for much of this, I look to Venus, Mars, and the descendant. What immediately stands out to me with Venus in Aquarius, Mars in Scorpio, and descendant in Taurus, all three of these placements are in fixed signs. So she's going to be attracted to fixed signs, So I might break this down mode wise. I might break this down by mode. Usually I break down compatibility by element. And I go with, usually the element of a person's Venus, Mars, or descendant. But considering they're all in different elements and they're all in the same mode, I think I'm going to break this down by mode. That might be kind of fun. So let's talk about fixed signs first. I see clear attraction to fixed signs. I would say any of the fixed signs might be worth looking at for her. She needs and wants someone consistent, stable, someone very strong-willed. Very strong-willed. Like, I really want to emphasize that. Someone who just they are what they are. It's black and white. They're not going to budge. She wants someone who's a little bit stubborn, someone just fierce, someone who sticks to their guns and says, this is how I am, this is what it is. It's simple. I think she wants that kind of simplicity. So yeah, she will find that to varying degrees with any of the fixed signs. Mars is in Scorpio, so especially having ascendant and Mars in Scorpio, she has so much of her energy there. And then plus, having Moon in Cancer as well, I think she'll deeply relate to individuals that have major placements in Scorpio. Her and people who have those Scorpio placements, they'll both be ambitious, emotional, sexual. Also, people with those water placements tend to want a more close-knit relationship. So she may enjoy that closeness, especially sexually, which again is just kind of weird for me to talk about. But Mars is sexual energy. That's more what Mars contributes in the compatibility arenas, like sexual attraction and chemistry. So she may find that deep chemistry with people who have water placements, but specifically Scorpio. And she may relate to them on a deep level because she is a water moon sign. She's going to understand, she's going to be deeply perceptive and intuitive like someone who has major Scorpio placements. I also always have to say, I do notice many couples who have the same ascendant sign. So Scorpio rising could be interesting for her as well. Because she has Scorpio rising, though, I would usually not recommend Scorpio. I only am because Mars is there with the ascendant. But usually the way it works is you are what your ascendant represents. You're usually attracted to what your descendant represents. So that's the opposite point. The ascendant is you and what you're all about. The descendant is what you expect from other people and what you are truly compatible with on a long-term level. So for her, she is Scorpio. She is Scorpio rising and Mars, and we haven't even talked about Lilith and Pluto yet. I feel like I've been neglecting those. But anyway, with descendant and Taurus, that would suggest to me that she's a little bit more out of the box. Like she's the dreamer, she's the weirdo, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just she's the person that's more creative and maybe oftentimes more dark and more out there. She's got big ideas and these big feelings and things like that. I think what she would be attracted to would be symbolized by Taurus, which is just much more chill. It's more of a vanilla sign, more mainstream, more definitely less complicated. Taurus is the most consistent sign. It's the most reliable. So that's what I see her being attracted to. And I need a tissue. It's really weird, specifically during readings. Like this is really gross, but like I'll either like burp or like my nose will start running, and I really think it's a spiritual thing. Like it's like everything is being pulled out of me. It's really weird and kind of gross, so I'm sorry for sharing. But anyway, so Taurus descendant, she wants that groundedness. That's another huge thing as well. I think she can get lost in her own feelings and her own fears, insecurities, but also her passions, her just emotion in general. She can get lost in her own creativity. I think what she needs is someone just down to earth, chill, again, maybe someone who's a little bit more predictable. Just what you see is what you get, just very even keel. So Taurus does look very beautiful for her. She also has Mercury in Capricorn, so she'll communicate well with any earth sign. So that definitely indicates compatibility as well. I'm realizing her compatibility is complicated, which I guess I could have guessed that. But yeah, some people, like, let's say your Venus, Mars, and Descendant are all in the same sign, because I have seen that. That's very simple compatibility wise. It means you need that sign, or maybe a person who has like that element very strong in their chart. But if your Venus, Mars, and Descendant, and the rest of your placements in general, if they're more scattered, they're in different elements, you'll need someone who's kind of a perfect combination of different astrological influences, if that makes sense. So for her, that's more what I see here. She does need someone down to earth and grounded, but she's also attracted to someone deeply emotional and passionate. And then we haven't even talked about Venus yet. So with Venus in Aquarius, that suggests, well, for one, it suggests an attraction to Aquarius, to people with Aquarius placements, or to people that are like Aquarius. So people that are very independent, very intelligent, cerebral. What else? People who are very unique or provocative, who have kind of a different appearance, or people that are like rebels, like they live their own life and they don't care about what other people expect or whatever. That would be very attractive to her. So the only thing that is really clear to me is she wants someone strong-willed, consistent, etc. Someone who's like a fixed sign. But once you get into the specifics, though, it's very complex. She needs someone down to earth and grounded, but also very intelligent and intellectual. Maybe someone a little bit detached, but also, for in this like more chemistry area of things, she also needs someone passionate and emotional. So it looks like she would need someone who is very well rounded, someone who has just the right kind of balance astrologically. Also with Venus and Aquarius, Venus not only shows what you're attracted to, it shows how you approach things that you are attracted to. It shows how you express yourself romantically. So with Venus and Aquarius, that would suggest to me that she's not always comfortable expressing herself romantically, which I know sounds really weird because that seems to be a huge part of her career. But but I think when it comes to those actual like romantic experiences that she has, which obviously I'm not privy to those, but I would speculate that it's really strange. It's like in general she's very emotional, very passionate, very emotionally aware. But I think specifically with relationships and with romance, I think that may be a little bit more tricky for her. It may be more difficult for her to express herself emotionally and romantically. And what else was I gonna say about that? And she may be a little bit more aloof as well. Like she may not always be the most like sensitive, touchy feely, lovey-dovey person in relationships. She may not always feel comfortable with that emotion. So that's why this would all suggest she may drive very well. Jive, I haven't heard that word in so long. She may really vibe with someone who has either major Aquarius placements or other intellectual kind of cerebral placements, like other air signs. Like maybe we'll talk about Gemini and Libra soon. I want to actually think about it before I commit to that. But usually I would suggest air placements in general. So yeah, it's tricky. She needs someone, and this does exist, but she needs someone who is deeply detached and intellectual and analytical, but also deeply emotional at the same time, but also grounded. That's kind of a tall order. It does exist, but that may be difficult to find. The last fixed sign that we haven't talked about is Leo, and I think Leo she would have a deep connection with. Her south node is in Leo, and she's a Sagittarius sun, so she will relate to Leo on some level. That being said, though, there are no planets in Leo at all. There are no compatibility placements in Leo. It's the only fixed sign where there isn't a compatibility placement. So someone who is like really bold and like outgoing, and a guy who's more like masculine in a traditional sense, someone who's more fiery and like impulsive, I don't think that's actually what she's going for. I think she's looking for someone more nuanced, someone more just like chill, just here I am, someone who is very strong-willed, but someone who has that confidence, that really deep like inner confidence, where they don't have to brag, they don't have to exert their power or their confidence on anyone else. They just have that like inner really strong confidence where they can be maybe kind of intense but also chill at the same time, like laid back but also intense. Like I know it's a weird combination, it's a little bit contradictory, but the one thing I don't think she's looking for is someone fiery, bold, passionate. To some extent, she already has that energy. I don't think she needs that in someone else. I think she's looking for a guy that's actually, like I said, more internal. Let's look at cardinal signs. So this is so weird for me. She does have a lot of cardinal placements. She has a lot going on in Cancer and Capricorn. So she will relate to cardinal signs, especially Cancer and Capricorn. Libra and Aries, she's going to butt heads with because Libra and Aries will form squares, T squares, maybe even, grand. I'm spacing what it's called. A grand cardinal square. Grand cardinal cross, whatever. Libra and Aries are going to form a lot of squares with her chart. So, in other words, like Libra and Aries will be very contentious for her. There's going to be a lot of tension. I think Libra's a weird one for her. Libra would be difficult because she lacks air placements. But at the same time, she has Venus in Aquarius, which suggests she is attracted to people that are intellectual and detached. Libra is intellectual and detached, so that could be attractive for her. I don't think that would be good, though. I think Libra would be very passionate, but also very unstable for her because of those squares. Like, they're really going to butt heads. So I could see an attraction at first, but it looks really rough. I like pairing people that have a few squares, in between them. I think it can make it tense, it can be passionate, it can be sexual, but this is too much though. It's too many squares, too tense. They're just gonna be butting heads all the time. Same with Aries, really. Aries also forms all these squares. I think Aries would be even worse for her though. I'm almost thinking Aries might be the worst sign for her. Because again, she has compatibility placements in water, air, earth. Fire is the only one that she's not. It's the element that I don't think she's looking for, and Aries is the fire sign that squares the most of her placements. So she's really gonna butt heads with Aries. They're gonna be fighting all the time, and I don't see any attraction there. So I don't see how that relationship would even start from the get go. But even if it did start, it would be really volatile, really up and down, tumultuous. That looks real rough. I don't recommend that at all for either of them. But Capricorn and Cancer is a little bit of a different story. She has so many placements in both of those signs. She's going to relate to people with placements in either of those signs. Cancer and Capricorn are very much focused on stability, which I think she'd be attracted to as well. They are a little bit like fixed signs in that way. But Cancer and Capricorn are leaders. Breaking it down by mode, I think it's one of those things where she already has that energy. She's not necessarily looking for that in someone else. She already is a leader. She's an initiator. I think what she needs is someone who's just more straightforward, just chill. Someone who is a leader, but more in the sense of like a leader by example rather than like leading, like not someone who's necessarily like initiating some kind of agenda to change the world. I think she wants someone who's just a leader by example, someone who knows how to live their own life type of thing. So she already is the initiator. She's already the person changing the world. She doesn't need that in someone else. Lastly, let's look at mutable signs. Actually, real quick, one more thing about that. So let me make that clear because I don't think I explained myself well enough. Capricorn and Cancer, I more see her as being friends with people that have placements in those signs, or maybe having like close, like loved ones, close family members, because she will relate a lot to Cancer and Capricorn. I just don't see any romantic attraction to those signs. That's more what I meant. Or I mean, I guess technically she could have a romantic connection with those signs, but it doesn't seem as good of a fit to me. It's off. There would have to be the right kind of other placements going on for that to work. Lastly is mutable signs. So this one seems a little bit awkward because she definitely has less going on in mutable signs than any other modality, which is strange for a Sagittarius sun, but she actually has no other mutable planets at all. So mutable signs, I think mutable signs are already universally difficult to understand anyway because they're constantly going back and forth. They're more nuanced, they're more complicated. So they're already generally hard to understand, but especially for her, only having Sagittarius sun and no other mutable planets. Not only do I think she wouldn't necessarily understand mutable signs, I think she also just wouldn't be attracted to them. Like, there's no reason to understand them. There's nothing to really gain there. She wants someone just straightforward. What you see is what you get. any of the mutable signs, none of them are going to fit that. Pisces and Gemini are probably the least likely candidates in that respect. Like Pisces and Gemini are the most flimsy, the most adaptable, the most constantly changing. That is the exact opposite of what she wants. So I'm grouping like Pisces, Aries, and Gemini together as the worst signs for her. I don't see those working at all. Yeah, I just don't see any attraction there. She needs someone really strong-willed, someone, assertive and just consistent. Pisces and Gemini are some of the least consistent signs. Virgo and Sagittarius are a little bit more consistent. Sagittarius she would also relate to because her sun is there, but again, with fire signs, I more see her as relating to them. I see her as being friends with fire signs like Sagittarius. I don't see a romantic attraction for her with Sagittarius. I see it more as a friendship. And then Virgo, Virgo seems awkward for her. Virgo is somewhat consistent, and they are an Earth sign. They're practical, down to earth. Virgo has some of what she's looking for, but Virgo's always constantly changing. Virgo is very nuanced, which I don't think is what she's looking for. And Virgo is also cerebral, analytical. She does want someone with that kind of intelligence, but at the same time, I don't know. I wouldn't pair her with a Mercury ruled sign, though. I don't know. It's just awkward. I don't like it. I'm just gonna leave it at that. So yeah, my top picks for her would be, I think, Taurus, Aquarius, and Scorpio. I have to just go with the signs of the compatibility placements themselves. Yeah, I don't know. It's that one's a weird one. So yeah, I guess it makes sense. She's notorious for dysfunctional relationships, right? I mean, her chart to me validates that kind of reputation. The last thing I wanted to say before I close this out, this has gone on way too long. I always do this, but last thing I wanted to say is there's a huge Jupiter influence. I talked about how the moon is very strong in the chart. Mars is very strong. I still think Mars is probably the strongest. But Jupiter is very strong as well. Jupiter rules over both the luminaries. Well, no, that's not accurate. Jupiter doesn't rule Cancer, but it's exalted there. So Moon is in Cancer, which is the sign of Jupiter's exaltation. So there's a Jupiter connection to the Moon. Let's just put it that way. And then Jupiter literally rules over the Sun because it's in Sagittarius. And Jupiter is also exalted in Cancer. So that's huge, and that kind of makes sense for celebrity status as well. Jupiter makes things larger than life and brings expansion and abundance and wealth, and it's a very optimistic energy. So that is very strong as well. So breaking it down by planet, definitely the dominants in my opinion are Jupiter, the moon, and Mars. So I think combining those it's very dynamic, honestly very volatile, very emotional. It's definitely a mix of very pessimistic with some very optimistic energies. But what else? Mars and Jupiter in particular are like very focused on expansion when you combine them together. Very driven. And adding those with the moon it's a very passionate mix, very emotional. So anyway, that's my take on the chart of Taylor Swift. I hope you enjoyed this celebrity chart reading. Again, if you are interested in getting a reading from me or asking me anything, check out my website, check out my email. It's all in the description. But thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.